long way from where he was, so I'm sure. But this is why things are interesting like this, more so than old China that, you know, I've dealt with for a long time, that just has a name on it and it's supposed to be good quality. This is much more interesting, and it relates to New Zealand.
No, absolutely.
What I'm always saying. It's about New Zealand now, not about some far-off piece of English stuff that we don't even care about.
Yeah, Martin?
Well, so, I mean, Hamish, you had a hard act to follow with Liza in a prison from the Graf Spey, but that's a good story. Anybody following Liza in that story is...
I tell you what, I did find the solid sterling silver ship made for the HMS New Zealand in Glasgow when I was at Dunbar Sloane, which was completely silver, and I ended up going to the Navy in Devonport and saying, you should buy this, because we were going to auction it. And they ended up buying it. It's in the Navy now.
Great story.
Oh, Hamish, you've done it again. Thanks for your story. That's amazing. That's extraordinary. So that is...
I got a MiG jet fighter's compression suit 2 weeks ago in Dunedin.
Hold that thought. We'll be back in a month for you, Hamish. I want to hear about the MiG suit.
Hamish is a collector.
All right, Hamish there.
We need
and
that TV program back again.
And you can stop now about working from home and Jenny Morton's comments. You're not, and I was just teasing, you're not chip-eating, pyjama-wearing slackers.
Well, the pyjama-wearing bit might be true.
Yeah, that's true.
Popcorn eating.
Wonderful stuff. Jenny Morton, Martin Bosley, thanks for your time. Thanks again for producing the show.
Always.
I'm Wallace Chapin, back 3:45 tomorrow. Lisa Owen and Checkpoint next.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Susana Leatawa. E haere aki nei, coming up, deeply disappointed, New Zealand Rugby launches an investigation into the antics of the Ranfurly Shield winning Hawke's Bay side. We ask the union CEO if players were snorting drugs off the famous log of wood. Claims of chicken as Christopher Luxon says his schedule's too busy to reschedule tomorrow night's debate. The council versus landowner stoush that's left the public blocked from a popular coastal walkway. We'll get the latest from Met Service about the high winds buffeting the South Island. And ferry passengers see red as their blue highway services majorly cut back. You can watch us live on the RNZ website, Facebook and Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi Marie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. Severe gales have caused power outages and flight cancellations across the South Island and Lower North Island. At Cape Turnagain on the east coast of the North Island, gusts have reached 172 kilometres per hour. At least 1,000 properties are without power in Otago and Canterbury. Air New Zealand has cancelled 80 flights, while 14 Cook Strait ferry sailings have been cancelled. State Highway 80 is now open in Canterbury after a camper van blew over this afternoon. Met Service meteorologist Alan Bailey says strong winds have brought down power lines. He advises people to keep an eye on the forecast.
In general, just tie down your loose objects, trampolines in particular. Keep an eye out for falling trees and power lines, obviously very dangerous in this kind of weather. Be prepared for power cuts across the South Island.
New Zealand Rugby says it hasn't contemplated drug testing the Ranfurly Shield after social media images emerged of a white substance and a rolled-up banknote on the trophy amid Hawke's Bay celebrations over the weekend. Hawke's Bay won the Shield off Wellington, but during the celebrations, the newly refurbished Shield was dropped and it broke in half. Social media images show the Shield broken along with white powder on it. NZR General Manager Steve Lancaster says they're investigating what happened, but he's unsure if they could drug test the trophy.
It's not something that we've contemplated at this stage. I don't know if that would be feasible or not. It's making its way back to us at NZR now. We'll determine the next steps once we've got our hands on it.
Hawke's Bay rugby boss Jay Campbell says he doesn't believe players were involved in snorting cocaine off the Shield. Campbell says the incident happened at a party at a player's flat. The National Party is rejecting Labour's claim leader Christopher Luxon is being a chicken for not going to the leaders' debate hosted by the Press newspaper tomorrow night. Labour leader Chris Hipkins can't attend as he's isolating with COVID-19, and work to find another date hasn't been successful. Nationals campaign chair Chris Bishop says Labour is being childish. Mr Luxon can't pull out of a debate that isn't happening.
That is utterly infantile and stupid. The only person who has pulled out of a leaders' debate is the leader of the Labour Party and our Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins. That is facile and infantile, much like the Labour Party.
Chris Bishop says National has offered for its deputy, Nicola Willis, to debate Labour Deputy Leader Kelvin Davis, but to no response. Joanna Norris, the managing editor of Staff, which publishes the press, says it's extremely disappointing for the South Island's only in-person leaders' debate. Ms Norris says Staff is now considering options for an alternative debate in Christchurch. Senior Labour MP Grant Robertson says the abuse candidates are experiencing this campaign is worse than previous elections. Multiple political parties have reported heightened levels of vitriol and violence this election, with some candidates saying they have been assaulted by the public. National's campaign chairperson Chris Bishop has listed examples of incidents including a candidate being forced to move house by a gang, death threats and abuse. Mr Robertson says the abuse this campaign has been worse.
It does feel a bit worse, yeah, to me. I think that's been probably an evolution over the last few years. There's always been tension in campaigns, there's always been defacing of billboards and so on, but I think some of the things we've seen and heard in recent times indicate a higher degree of that this time.
Grant Robertson says heightened levels of tension and abuse this election isn't acceptable. Watercare has postponed until tomorrow the laying of a temporary pipeline to reduce a massive wastewater overflow in Auckland. The blockage and collapse of a sewage and stormwater pipe last week has left a 13-metre deep sinkhole in Parnell, with hundreds of litres of sewage per second being pumped into the sea. The pipeline was to go in today, but crews spent the day preparing the ground. In sport, Wallabies coach Eddie Jones has jokingly suggested they may have to make a social visit to the Fijian team if Australia are to extend their stay at the Rugby World Cup in France. Australia have kept alive their slim hopes of advancing to the quarter-final with a 34-14 win over Portugal in their final pool match. The Wallabies are second in Pool C, but third-placed Fiji need just 1 point from their final pool game against Portugal to qualify for the knockout phase of the tournament ahead of Australia.
Maybe take some kava to Fiji. I think you're giving Marika and Sully my credit card and get him to go to the Fijian camp with some kava. Maybe that might work.
South Africa won their final pool match, beating Tonga 49-18. They currently sit at the top of their group, although unbeaten Ireland are yet to play Scotland. Meanwhile, the New Zealand secondary schools have beaten their Australian counterparts 55-36 in Canberra. Buffalo Bills player Damar Hamlin has made a winning return to the NFL, playing his first game since suffering a cardiac arrest on the field 9 months ago. And US gymnast Simone Biles has made history at the World Champs in Antwerp, becoming the first woman to land a Yurchenko double pike vault. The move, now renamed the Biles 2, helped the 26-year-old American to first place in all-round qualifying. Biles is competing internationally for the first time since taking a 2-year break from the sport. That's the news.
Labour leader Chris Hipkins out sick a fortnight from election day.
To quote Chris, bugger. I mean, clearly this isn't something we ever wanted to happen.
National lays down the challenge for a new look leaders debate.
I'm not sure that's been put to them, but I'm putting it to them now, I suppose, on morning radio. So there you go. Nicola Willis and Kelvin Davis. How about it?
And reports of abuse aimed at candidates ramp up.
He grabbed my shoulders and shook me, and then he slapped my cheeks with both his hands, like someone putting on aftershave.
Keeping you informed on election issues. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're on Checkpoint next with Susana Leatawa. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. France brings severe gales to parts of the country today. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty, rain tonight, then becoming fine tomorrow morning. Waikato to Kapiti Coast, including Taumarunui, Taupo and Taihape. Rain this afternoon or evening, briefly heavy with Possible thunderstorms in the west. Isolated showers tomorrow morning, otherwise fine. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Wellington. Rain spreading north today, then turning to a few showers tomorrow. Northwest gales from Hawke's Bay southwards today. Severe in exposed places. Nelson, Marlborough, Buller and Westland. Rain with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms in the north. Easing to showers everywhere this afternoon, then becoming fine tomorrow morning. Northwest gales in Marlborough today. Canterbury, Otago, Southland and Fiordland. Showers today, mainly fine tomorrow. Gale northwesterlies changing to southwest, severe in exposed places. Winds easing overnight. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, partly cloudy. Occasional rain from tonight until tomorrow afternoon. Southwest gales tomorrow. It is coming up to 8 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines for you at 20 past 5.
Kia ora, Evie. Tēnā koutou katoa. No mai haere mai ki checkpoint I tēnei rā. New Zealand Rugby says it's deeply disappointed and has launched an investigation into circumstances around damage to the Ranfurly Shield. Hawke's Bay won the prized loggerwood off Wellington on Saturday. The Hawke's Bay Rugby Union says a player dropped the shield on a concrete floor on Sunday morning, splitting it in two. There are also images circulating online of white powder on the shield, which is part of the NZR's review. New Zealand Rugby has taken back possession of the shield, which it says is a taonga of the game. We'll hear from the Hawke's Bay Union boss in a moment, but first, here's Felix Walton.
It was celebration time when Hawke's Bay won the Ranfurly Shield off Wellington on the weekend. But the celebration soon turned to disaster for the prized loggerwood, split in half after being dropped on the floor.
That's a bit disrespecting the shield.
Silly buggers. Naughty, 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 bad, bad boys.
They must have been a bit drunk, eh? They must have had a bit too much beers, eh?
I mean, I think it's kind of funny. I know there's tradition and stuff, but end of the day, it's a game.
These locals weren't the only ones unimpressed. New Zealand Rugby is also investigating. What they're also looking into is social media photos showing a white powder on one half of the broken shield. The shield was a replacement built from English oak earlier this year to make sure it lasted another 100+ years. Ex-Magpie Simon Tremaine says that doesn't make a difference.
I don't think that matters too much. The reality is that is the current Ranfurly Shield. That is what all the provincial teams of New Zealand play for, and that is, a piece of the history of New Zealand.
Mr Tremaine says he believes it was a genuine accident, but rugby commentator Scotty Stevenson is less forgiving.
An accident is an accident, but everything subsequent to that shield being dropped, the Snapchats, the posts on social media, people laughing about that leaves me in a state of shock, really, because it shows such a flagrant disregard for the history of that taonga.
Mr Stevenson told Morning Report the shield is an important part of rugby history.
The Ranfurly Shield is a very important trophy in New Zealand rugby. In fact, it's the only important trophy in New Zealand domestic rugby, quite frankly. Players far better than anyone in that Hawke's Bay side went their entire lives without getting their hands on the Ranfurly Shield, and to see it treated in such a degrading manner is frankly, it just disgusts me.
Simon Tremaine says many rugby fans, including in Hawke's Bay, are understandably upset.
The shield means a lot to many people. We've got a massive history with the shield and how proud we are to have won it on the weekend. A piece of the history of New Zealand. I'm sure many people around the country will be pretty upset.
Wellington Lions coach Tamati Ellison refused RNZ's request for comment.
Hawke's Bay Rugby Union CEO Jay Campbell says it's a very disappointing situation for the side.
First and foremost, I guess this has impacted what should have been a celebration for our whole community. Instead, it's resulted in an incident here that obviously the team are going to have to take full responsibility for.
Were players snorting cocaine off the shield?
Look, I guess in terms of those social media images that are circulating around, NZR have opened an investigation, and Hawke's Bay Rugby Union are supporting them 100% as we try and work through kind of what's fact and what's fiction. There is a lot of speculation out there, and we just need to make sure that investigation goes through before we can confirm or comment on that.
So what do you think that was on the shield?
Well, it's not really up to me to say what was on the shield. I guess what we have to try and identify is what did Hawke's Bay Rugby Union players do? They are representing the union, and so therefore they come in terms of their players' contracts, in terms of they come under the Players Collective, and that means that they need to adhere to a whole lot of rules. So we probably just need to let this investigation go through, find out what actually occurred, where Hawke's Bay Rugby Union players, if they were involved, what they were doing.
Are any players being stood down?
Well, as I've said, there's an investigation going on, and there'll be a number of employment and rugby conditions which will fall out of the bottom of that whenever that eventuates. But as I said, Hawke's Bay Rugby is fully supportive of this investigation. We need to get to the bottom of it. We're extremely disappointed as a union, and I know the playing group, they're clearly disappointed in themselves and how it reflects not only on them and our union, but on their families and whānau.
How many players are under investigation?
Well, as I said, that at the moment, we're opened up an investigation to see what was going on. Now, it appears from early indications that there is potentially maybe a maximum of a dozen players who were present, but again, we can't really comment until that investigation has been undertaken.
So a dozen were in the kitchen?
No, I didn't say that. It said it appears at this stage that it is up to a dozen players were in and around that area. We still have to get that confirmed.
Where did this happen, Jay? Was it at a party?
Yes, it was at a flat, one of the players' flats, and obviously an incident has occurred where a player has dropped the shield.
When did you find out about it?
I stayed in Wellington and travelled back by plane, and when I got in just after 10:30 in the morning, obviously my phone started lighting up. So that was kind of the first time that I had any indication that there had been any incident. And as I said, bloody disappointed, because we should be talking about what was a fantastic result for the Magpies and for our community, which has been through so much this year. So that's why it's so disappointing. And obviously then it's the impact that it's having on all sorts of other stuff, where we're wasting time talking about things that we shouldn't really be talking about.
Are you able to take us through how the shield actually broke?
I think probably the best thing would be to wait for the investigation and see what happens there. Again, there's a lot of speculation going on. I've spoken to the players, spoken to the player group, and they've been quite clear as to what happened. But again, let's wait and see what the findings of the investigation bring.
Have the players denied taking cocaine?
Again, this photo only came to light to me late last evening. The indication so far from players is that they were unaware of what was going on. There are a number of other people that were at the party and the celebration, so I think we just need to wait and see what the findings of the investigation are before we take further action.
In the social media videos, you can hear people laughing. What do you think about that?
Yes, that's very, very disappointing. And we can confirm that isn't a player that took that video. It's bloody disappointing to think that somebody would actually do that. We massively respect the Shield, and I know it doesn't look like that, and that's what's so disappointing, is that the actions of some have caused a lot of grief and a lot of heartache, and it's from a Hawke's Bay Rugby point of view, we apologise, and we need to make this right.
Hawke's Bay Rugby Union CEO there, Jay Campbell. It's coming up to 16 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai, you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Labour Party is accusing Nationals leader Christopher Luxon of chickening out of a debate. The high-profile press debate in Christchurch was set to go ahead tomorrow evening until Chris Hipkins came down with COVID-19. Labour, National and the press have been trying to negotiate a new date or alternative, but look to have reached a stalemate. Our Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch pulled together this report on what is the first day of voting.
You can start voting now, team. Go for it.
Christopher Luxon dropping into a Baptist church in Botany to cast his early ballot this morning. It recalls similar scenes from last election when his predecessor Judith Collins clasped her hands, dropped to her knees and sent up a prayer before voting.
It's between me and God, actually.
No such invocation this year, no call for divine intervention, as National rides high in the polls. Its leader wants people to vote, and to vote soon, keen to lock in his party's lead.
For a lot of Kiwis, they're over the campaign. They want to be able to make their decision and actually start the change they want to see happen.
The Greens' James Shaw was getting in early on day one too, having his say at Victoria University in Wellington.
I'm not one of those people who's going to be spending the next 2 weeks racked with indecision about who to vote for.
Those people are the ones Labour is still seeking to win over, as it lags in the polls, its leader still cooped up with COVID. Prior to his positive test, Chris Hipkins issued a different message, a tentative plea to the undecided. Taihoa.
If you're sitting there thinking, I'm not quite sure yet, I've still got some nagging doubts in my mind, then do wait, because there's still another 2 weeks of campaigning to go.
And now a week of that with him out of action. It was left to offsider Duncan Webb to announce Labour's new supermarket policy today, a high-level pledge to help new competitors enter the sector.
It would be a much better announcement if he was here, obviously.
Chris Hipkins' COVID condition is quite the campaign complication. He was due to face off with Christopher Luxon in the third and penultimate leaders' debate tomorrow night, the press's traditional town hall showdown in Christchurch. Labour wants to reschedule, but Nationals said no, its calendar is full. Labour's responded by posting a photo online of Mr Luxon in a chicken suit.
Christopher Luxon is running scared from Chris Hipkins. That's what's happening.
It is utterly infantile and stupid. We can't pull out of a debate that's not happening. Chris Hipkins has COVID.
He can find a date next week. We've offered alternatives. He can do the same and the debate can go ahead.
Well, I think it makes sense for the deputies to go up against each other.
This is a leaders' debate, and if you want to show leadership, front up.
The stalemate comes at a particularly tense time in the campaign, with reports of a more volatile atmosphere. Police are investigating a break-in at the home of Te Pāti Māori candidate Hannah Maipi Clark, an attack she believes was politically motivated. Labour candidate Angela Roberts has reported being shaken and slapped by a member of the public after a local debate. And today, National says its candidates too have faced intimidation and abuse, particularly from the gangs.
Just this morning we had someone out campaigning who had wood thrown at them, and we've had some serious incidents that we've raised with the police. And so I have spoken to the individuals concerned, because some of them are quite concerning and have put them at physical risk. They have understandably been quite shaken by it.
National says one of its candidates has been forced to move house after a gang threat, another had their house broken into, a volunteer received death threats, and another was attacked by someone's dog. National's campaign chair Chris Bishop says it is disgraceful.
This has been a troubling series of events, thuggery and intimidation that has no place in a New Zealand election campaign.
And on that, all politicians can agree.
Stuff's Managing Director Joanna Norris says National has confirmed Mr Luxon won't be available on an alternative date once Mr Hipkins is out of isolation. She says it's extremely disappointing to the thousands of people who are looking forward to seeing both leaders in person in the only South Island debate. It's 20 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora, e te iwi, ho mai o whakaaro. Don't forget you can text us on 2101 and you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Anei a iwi e ma ngā pito pito kōrero.
Kia ora. New Zealand Rugby has taken back the Ranfurly Shield and launched an investigation after a Hawke's Bay player dropped it, breaking it in two after Saturday's win over Wellington. Hawke's Bay Rugby Union is also investigating social media posts of the shield with the white powder on it and whether it's cocaine. Hawke's Bay CEO Jay Campbell told Checkpoint up to a dozen players could be involved in the investigation. Labour and National are arguing over tomorrow night's planned Christchurch press leaders debate, despite neither leader planning to attend. Labour's Chris Hipkins has COVID-19, so can't take part, while National says Christopher Luxon won't go and can't make any other night. Labour says Mr Luxon is being chicken. National says Mr Luxon can't pull out of a debate that isn't happening. Senior Labour MP Grant Robertson says the abuse candidates are experiencing this campaign is worse than in previous elections. Mr Robertson says politicians should be able to campaign fairly and freely. Met Service says a wind gust of 172 kilometres per hour has been recorded at Cape Turnagain as severe gales lashed the South Island and Lower North Island. 80 flights and 14 Cook Strait ferry sailings have been cancelled, and at least 1,000 properties are without power in Otago and Canterbury. And Kiwi Rail made a near $771 million loss in the year ended June, new figures reveal. The full year loss is 70% bigger than in the previous year, with revenue growth of 17%. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, strong wind warnings and wind gusts are affecting traffic all around the country, as you might realise. Take care in your travels, especially if you're using a light or high-sided vehicle. Meanwhile, State Highway 80 has reopened between Lake Pukaki to Aoraki Mount Cook after closing due to strong winds. Our next traffic news and headlines is at about 20 to 6.
Kia ora, Evie. The Wallabies are playing a waiting game in France as they remain in limbo until next Monday to find out their fate at the Rugby World Cup. A win over Portugal this morning means the Australians will be hoping Fiji slip up in their final group game and gift the Wallabies a place in the quarterfinals. With some time on their hands, coach Eddie Jones has a few suggestions about what his players could do to help their cause. We're joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. Kia ora, Felicity.
Kia ora.
So, another post-match clanger by Eddie Jones.
Well, I'm not sure that Eddie Jones has got much to be happy about at this World Cup, but he was making some jokes in the post-match press conference after today's 34-14 bonus point win over Portugal. He's acknowledging the fact that they're in a pretty bad position. He's apologised basically all World Cup for the position that the Wallabies are in, and he was still doing that today, but I think he's getting a little bit tired of some of the journalists' questions, and he was brushing them aside. And when he was asked a little bit about what he'd be doing during the 3 days off he's given the side, here was his response.
Well, maybe take some kava to Fiji. I think you give him Marika and Sully my credit card and get him to go to the Fijian camp with some kava. Maybe that might work.
So the two players that he mentioned there are Fiji-born, so that was maybe why he was suggesting that they would fit quite seamlessly into the Fiji squad. There is no, suggestion as to actually what relationship those players have with the other players out of Fiji. And so kava's the popular drink in the islands, and it's a drug-based drink, so maybe Eddie Jones was hoping that there would be enough disruption if his players showed up with it, because Fiji actually only need 1 point from their last pool game, and then that would knock the Wallabies out and it would get the Fijian side through to another quarter-final. So I don't know quite where Eddie Jones's mind was at, but maybe he's just clutching at straws and trying to find ways to keep him and his side in the competition.
Indeed. Now, to gymnastics. American gymnast Simone Biles continues to impress in her return to competitive gymnastics. Amazing.
She does. I mean, this is an athlete who was out for 2 years after, you might remember, she had to pull out of the last Olympic Games. She got that medical term that was a little bit the twisties, throws her off for her balance, but she seems to have found her form straight away again. She was at the World Champs. She became the first woman to land the Yoshinko double pike vault. So this is the highest scoring women's jump. She did this, and it was named after originally Natalia Yoshinko, and that was to do with the way that she approached the vault, so not actually what Biles did in her aerial part of that. But now this has been renamed Biles 2 for all of what Simone was able to do today. And so she's not the first one, though, so as Biles 2 might suggest, but she's actually got 5 named after her. So it's 2 for floor exercise, 2 for vault, and 1 on the balance beam. So that's pretty impressive, isn't it? And she's had today, her efforts helped to get the American team to the top in all-around qualifying. But yeah, as you mentioned, it was the first time internationally competing, so they're probably pretty pleased to have her back on the team. And now she's going to have teammates competing that event named after her.
Oh, it's great to see her back. Thanks so much, Felicity. The public has been blocked from a hugely popular coastal walkway because of a stoush between the council and a property owner. The Takapuna to Milford coastal walk runs through the Firth family property in Takapuna. Paul Firth allowed the public to freely walk through his property after a public bridge was washed out in storms 12 years ago. In 2013, Auckland Council gave the small cottage on the land a Category A heritage status, meaning it can't be demolished and developed. The inheritors of the property say they will gift the land, the public walkways, through to the council, but only if the heritage status of the cottage is removed so the property can be developed. A year on, there is still no resolution, so the owners have put up a fence blocking any public access through their property. The lawyer acting for the property owners, Alex Whitten-Hanna, says it doesn't make any sense for the cottage to be listed as a heritage building.
They want the heritage listing that is on the old cottage on the site, near derelict cottage, to be lifted so that they can sell the property, because no one's going to buy it while there is this heritage listing.
How bad is the state of the cottage?
Dilapidated, asbestos roof, not insulated. It can't be rented because it doesn't even come close to meeting the healthy homes standards. It's been broken into recently by a drug addict. It's not suitable for preservation.
How much is the land worth now, and how much would it be worth without the heritage status?
Well, it's worth probably around $6 million now. That's without the heritage status. With the heritage status, well, somebody might pay a couple of million for it and sit on it and go through lengthy procedures to get the heritage listing lifted.
So what does the council want to have happen now?
I think that council would, my personal view is that council would dearly like to be able to wave a magic wand and lift the heritage listing, because the beneficiaries of the Firth estates, because Paul and his sister Anne have now passed away, the beneficiaries are willing to gift the access way to the people of Auckland so long as the heritage listing is lifted.
So why can't that happen?
Because of council bureaucratic processes. They've had years to do it, but I don't think they've really taken it seriously. Now, suddenly, that the beneficiaries have carried out their warning to council, if you don't get on with this, we're going to block the access way until you do. They're now scrambling. And just as the council is scrambling now, people are scrambling around the lava rocks to get around the fence.
What would it take for the owners to remove the fence so the public can pass through the property?
Oh, just for the council to show some goodwill and intention to get on with lifting the heritage listing in a reasonable time.
What other requirements do the owners have?
Just that the arrears of rates that largely accrued during Paul Firth's lifetime, but are still accruing, that the rates be, if you like, paid by the council on behalf of the estates, so that there's no longer that debt. And the amount involved at the moment is around $78,000.
So is the fence that the owners have put up just a way for them to get attention so they don't have to pay thousands of dollars in unpaid rates?
Well, that's absolutely wrong, absolutely wrong. If the heritage listing wasn't there, they could sell the property for at least $6 million and the rates wouldn't be an issue. This is not about the rates.
So why don't the owners just apply for a private plan change?
Have you any idea how long that would take, going through Auckland Council processes? That's a rhetorical question, I suppose. I'll tell you that it would be a very long period of time. Mind you, they've had a long period of time to deal with this. They've had years. Council should take the initiative and do it.
Are you optimistic this can be resolved?
Absolutely. Look, there was the other day, 7,000 people, a petition of 7,000 people petitioned Auckland Council to lift the heritage listing and have the walkway reopened. If Council shows goodwill and intention to do that, we don't expect it to be done overnight, don't expect it to be done necessarily before Christmas. But there needs to be a clear indication that Council are getting on with doing it.
What if Council lifts the heritage listing but doesn't agree to waiving the unpaid rates?
It probably wouldn't be such a big deal, because then the property could be sold for what it's worth and the rates would hardly be an issue.
That's lawyer Alex Whitten-Hanna there for the family. It's 31 minutes past 5, so 29 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Time for the business news. Ko taku hoa I nai ko Nona Peltier. Building consents issued, Nona, and they've fallen to the lowest level in nearly 3 years. What does this mean for the industry?
Well, look, the numbers are pretty big. We're talking about a 6.7% fall in building consents issued compared with the month before, which showed consents down 5.4%. So it's a steady decline. And what it's showing is that there's fewer building consents. This is for a lot of them is residential properties. It indicates that the construction industry, according to Westpac's Satish Ranchod, are going to see a material downturn of something like about 16% from its recent peaks. So that's quite a big downturn, and we've already started to see that. And so what it means to the housing industry is that perhaps there'll be fewer homes available for what is an increasing net population. So those two things colliding, not a really great story for the housing market. Although when it comes to other properties, so this would be industrial, for example, it's a real star of the construction sector, still booming along, lots of demand for that type of property. So yeah, it's a tough one. The downturn, though, in the construction sector does mean that the economy is going to cool. That's a positive for inflation and interest rates, but rising house prices, not so much. So it's going to be a fine balancing act. Westpac is looking at these numbers and suggesting that the Reserve Bank is still going to want to raise the official cash rate in November as a result of the balance here still pointing to strong underlying inflation in the economy.
The latest round of corporate reports from the retail sector points to tough times ahead. What's the outlook?
Well, it's very similar, with the underlying costs increasing. This is putting pressure on retail. At the same time, consumer sentiment is down. People are not thinking it's a good time to buy a major appliance, so they're not buying televisions. And last week we talked about the retail sector where the warehouse was concerned. Their Torpedo 7 company has a glut of bikes because that's a hangover from COVID. So people bought their bikes and then because that's pretty much the only thing they could do during the lockdown. And in the end now they're kind of like, well, I don't need a bike, so no one's really going out shopping for those. Same with big TVs and other big ticket items. What's really pushing the, consumerism is, just the non-durables, like you need a new kettle, so you go to Briscoe, or because that was one of the companies that we saw had been doing pretty well. Despite all of this, though, the reporting season we've just been through showed that retailers were still profitable, but that costs were weighing on them, and we're going to see some discounting, I'd say.
What else is happening on the markets, Nona?
Well, the index that fell, that's the top 50 index, fell 0.5% today, a 53-point drop to 11,243. We're seeing some mixed results through Asia. Japan's market was up, but others not so much, so they were mixed. The Australian market was hurt, also because oil prices took a bit of a knock, resources and so on. Overall, though, the dollar is trading at 59.9 US cents, 93.2 Australian, and 49.1 British pence.
Business News with Nona. Thank you very much, Nona Peltier. Commuters on Auckland's Gulf Harbour Peninsula are facing even more cancelled ferry trips, leaving some with no option but to spend 2 hours on a bus if they need to get to town. From today, the Gulf Harbour ferry will only operate twice in the morning and twice in the evening, a decision Auckland Council says was necessary due to a shortage of staff. Replacement buses that take double the time will now have to pick up the slack. Finn Blackwell reports.
Gulf Harbour commuters used to a 50-minute ferry trip could find themselves spending 2 hours on a bus to get to the same destination. And they're not happy.
Definitely is an inconvenience, I'm sure, to many people coming into work.
Is it easier to catch the bus or the ferry, you reckon?
I would definitely say the ferry. Avoid all the traffic, right?
Auckland Transport has reduced ferries on the Gulf Harbour and Half Moon Bay routes, while the operator, Fuller's 360, trains new staff. following mass cancellations of Fuller's ferries earlier in the year. Then Immigration Minister Michael Wood called a crisis meeting with Fuller's, Auckland Transport and Waka Kotahi to address the staff shortage. The result? Skippers and deckhands were added to the green list for visas. Despite that, the problem persists. Auckland Councillor John Watson says commuters aren't happy with the recent reductions.
They're really disgusted at the decimation of their service. So the service is being run down, and the people who have depended upon it, their lives have been thrown into travel chaos.
Morning sailings have been reduced to between 7 and 9 o'clock to the city, with evening return trips during a 2-hour slot from 5:15. Mr Watson says this represents an 83% reduction, although sailings were already regularly cancelled due to staff shortages and weather.
You have a service, a ferry that doesn't turn up more than half the time, and now it'll be down to 16% of the time that normally is in its timetable. So if there's a worse public transport service in New Zealand, I haven't heard about it.
In March, Fuller's told Checkpoint they were 50 staff down and said they had been working on the problem for 18 months. John Watson says there's a feeling in the community that their service is being deliberately wound down.
People in the community believe that that's not accidental, that their service has been treated as something of a sacrificial lamb to plug the numerous operational shortcomings elsewhere in the network.
The Hibiscus and Bays Local Board Deputy Chair, Julia Parfitt, says the ferry timetable cuts make trips to the city tedious.
People get frustrated with going here, there and everywhere on the way down to Silverdale to use the park and ride facility there, which, can barely cope anyway.
Ms Parfitt wants a new ferry operator to take on the Gulf Harbour service, but says that's easier said than done.
It appears that this particular service is bundled up in a contract with other services, and to decouple it is not as easy as it has been for the inner harbour services that looked to be as if they were going to be impacted severely.
For the time being, this commuter will need to spend 2 hours on a bus to get into town.
It's just okay. There are buses anyway, so I'm fine with that.
Easier to take the bus?
Well, it's just the same. A little bit longer, but I don't mind.
Auckland Transport has been approached for comment.
It's coming up to 20 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora e te iwi, haumai o whakaaro. Don't forget you can text us on 2101 and you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Anei a iwi me ngā pito kōrero.
The Hawke's Bay rugby boss, Jay Campbell, has told Checkpoint he doesn't believe players were snorting cocaine off the Ranfurly Shield after Saturday's win over Wellington. The shield was broken in two after being dropped, and social media images show the logger wood with white powder and a rolled-up banknote. New Zealand Rugby is investigating. Met Service says gusts of up to 120 kilometres an hour will continue to batter the capital into this evening. High winds are battering the South Island and parts of the North Island, knocking out power to homes and businesses and cancelling flights and ferry sailings. State Highway 80 is now open in Canterbury after a camper van blew over this afternoon, blocking both lanes of Mount Cook Road. A 41-year-old man has been arrested and charged following a robbery at a Christchurch petrol station last month. Police say they're no longer seeking help after the Sydenham Mobile on Colombo Street was held up on the morning of the 23rd of September. In Australia, early voting for the referendum on an Indigenous voice to Parliament begins today. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says he's been shocked by the negativity of the No campaign, accusing the opposition of asking questions that knows aren't genuine. And Te Whatu Order has confirmed 60 cases of cryptosporidiosis in Queenstown's ongoing outbreak. There are also 13 probable cases of the stomach bug and 10 under investigation. A boil water notice remains in place. Those are the headlines. headlines. Looking at traffic, strong winds and wind gusts are affecting traffic up and down the country. Waka Kotahi has wind warnings in place for State Highway 8 on Marama to Ferry, also Demutaka Hill, the Desert Road and Auckland Harbour Bridge. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Kia ora, Evie. Dozens of flights have been cancelled and Cook Strait ferry crossings abandoned as severe gales continue to lash many parts of the country. Power has also been cut in some areas and wind warnings are expected to remain in place for much of the South Island and also Wellington, Wairarapa and Tararua district. The main weather and disruptions are yet another blow for many families planning to head away in the second week of the school holidays. Air New Zealand says it's cancelled 80 flights, but more are likely to be affected. Joining us now for an update is Met Service meteorologist Amy Lutz. Kia ora, Amy.
Hello, how's it going?
Good, thank you. How high are these winds getting?
Yeah, we've seen some quite strong, damaging wind gusts around. The highest observation we've had so far today is 170 kilometres per hour. That's just around the coast in the Wairarapa.
And where are the worst affected areas?
So we've seen damaging wind gusts all through Canterbury and Otago. Lots of reports of trees down and power cuts associated with that. There's been quite a few stations recording wind gusts of over 120 kilometres per hour throughout that Canterbury and Otago region.
How long can we expect these weather conditions to last?
So thankfully, things are on an easing trend this evening. We've got a strong southwest change moving up through Canterbury currently, and that is followed by some severe southwest gales. We've seen gusts of 140 km per hour through Dunedin, and that's southwesterly. But the strong wind warning that we have associated with that is easing to about 8 p.m. tonight. And so as that front moves north tonight, we see an easing trend. So when people wake up tomorrow morning, things should be a lot calmer.
Any advice for people?
Just to secure any loose structures with these strong wind gusts, things could go flying pretty easily, and driving could be quite dangerous, as we've seen earlier in that headline with the camper van being flipped over. Limit your travelling and just stay up to date with the warnings.
El Niño was officially declared last week. Are these conditions what we can expect? More big winds?
So one of the characteristics with El Niño is a sort of enhanced westerly flow. We often get high pressures to the north of the country with a low to the south. So we see that sort of strong westerly winds through across us, which is what we're seeing currently.
Thanks so much. That's Amy Lutz, meteorologist with the Met Service. National says its candidates have been subject to incidents of violence and intimidation during the election campaign. Its campaign chair says one candidate has been forced to move house after a gang threat. Another candidate had a bottle of beer thrown over them and had their house broken into. Some volunteers have been subject to death threats, intimidation and a dog attack. Last week, Te Pāti Māori candidate Hannah Rafiti Maipi Clark had her home invaded and vandalised in an attack the party says was politically motivated. As well as that, Labour candidate Angela Roberts says she was slapped on both cheeks during an election debate. National's Auckland Central candidate Mahesh Muralidhar was filmed in a restaurant wearing his blue National Party jacket. The video has now been shared with a gang boss narrating over the top. Mahesh joins us now. Kia ora, Mahesh.
Kia ora.
Can you tell us about the video?
Yeah, so this was about a month or so ago, and me and my partner and a few of my volunteers, the team members, we were just having a simple meal, and this video was captured without our permission, and then it was shared around social media with some inflammatory language and by a senior member of a gang amongst their social circles.
Were you aware
This was obviously quite concerning for me and my team.
And were you aware that you were being filmed at the time?
No, absolutely not.
And do you know who filmed you?
No, I don't. But I was made aware that it was a senior member of the Headhunters gang, which obviously brings all sorts of questions to mind, right? And and quite a few incidents have occurred with the National Party candidates where gangs have been intimidating and aggressive, and I can only assume we've made a strong position that gangs need to be pushed back on. This goes hand in hand with the issues in the city centre, where we've had such a challenge with gangs, people being aggressive in lifts and drugs starting to really fester in different parts of Auckland Central due to gangs.
Mahesh, what concerns do you have as a result of this film now being shared on social media, this video?
I mean, the biggest concern is, the single most important thing in all of this is safety. Right? People put their hand up to do the right thing, and something the National Party and myself and the campaign promote a lot. So intimidation should never be a factor when we're trying to follow through the democratic process. We need to have civil conversation, and we need to manage civil conversation through this. So it is the disruption of that civil conversation which is a major concern. Also, there's no way that a gang member should feel okay to take a video like this and put inflammatory language and share it around. And this is, it's one thing, it's not okay that it's of me and other candidates may be affected in other ways, but also of my partner and team members. It's completely unacceptable.
Have there been any changes to your security settings as a result, Mahesh?
No, we talked about it. I always talk about the fact that safety is the most important thing, and we tell each other, hey, just please be a bit more mindful, and if there's any safety issues or anything along those lines, please walk away from it, and also flag it with the party straight away. But there's just increased unease. But we, power on because we want to make sure that things are put right in regards to the country.
Thank you, Mahesh. That's Mahesh Muralida, who is the national candidate for Auckland Central. It's coming up to 11 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Some news just to hand. Cabinet has signed off on a $7 million support package for troubled Ruapehu alpine lifts. RAL went into voluntary administration last year, $45 million in debt due to a bad ski season and the COVID-19 lockdowns. Regional Development Minister Kieran McNulty says Cabinet today decided that $7 million will be provided to RAL to allow the continued operation of its field operations until March 2024. This fund will help cover critical maintenance undertaken during the summer and provide additional certainty for the community. Business owners around Greymouth on the South Island's west coast know about tough times trading through coal mine closures, the Christchurch quakes and recessions. And then there's COVID and a cost of living crunch. Our reporter Jimmy Allingham and cameraman Nick Munro visited the region to gauge pre-election business confidence in the area.
Pink possum quilting is a colourful presence on the side of State Highway 6 between Greymouth and Runanga. Sue Roper owns the shop and says there are signs trade is improving, although she's not feeling overconfident pre-election.
It's started to pick up again. Yeah, I'm starting to do some travelling with my shop and got classes back in the shop now, and people are starting to trickle through, getting to see some tourists.
Do you rely on that passing trays?
I certainly do in summer, but more on the local market and the mail order in New Zealand.
Last year was tough for Mrs. Roper. As well as the COVID slowdown, the shop was flooded when a nearby creek overflowed.
So I had 1/2 metre of water through my shop, which meant that I was shut for about 4 months. So I had to replace all the shelving that you see around you and a lot of the low-lying fabric and stuff. And it was quite devastating, and it came in within an hour.
Many retailers spoken to by RNZ are concerned about cost of living pressures, and Mrs. Roper is no exception.
Even the price of fabric has gone up, and I've tried to absorb some of that myself, but you can only absorb so much.
Subscriptions are down, and there's the ever-growing presence of online shopping. Alf Harrison menswear owner Lindsay Gilshnan says that's one of many changes she and husband John have seen in their 38 years at the helm of the Greymouth business.
I think people are buying online since COVID and during COVID.
and that's killing a lot of retailers, so I'm being told.
And how can a business like yours match that?
Well, we can't. Yeah, we can't.
Like any business, it's evolved down the years.
The town was buzzing, way back then. But then, of course, the coal mines, all of they've gone, and they're trying to shut this down and that down. Yeah, but no, we used to be really busy. There was no Saturday trading way back then. A Friday night, sometimes we wouldn't close until 9 o'clock at night.
Mrs Gilshnan says business was looked after during the COVID years with the likes of bridging loans to get through. In Runanga, Mac's store and takeaways owner Gary McMillan says they're ticking along.
We've got a lot of loyal customers, and we've got a lot of people that come through, whether they're looking at the travelling up to Coal Creek Falls or down to the local swimming pool or the miners' hall. We get a lot of visitors.
But, like Mrs Roper at Pink Possum Quilting, dealing with rising costs is tough.
It's pretty hard to keep up with it. You've got to check everything all the time. When's it going to stop? Yeah, it makes it hard on us, really. Yeah.
Do you have to absorb some costs as well?
Some we do. Some we keep at the same price just to keep the locals coming in.
Mr McMillan says he would like to see political parties focus on security for business owners. A few k's north at Ruapehu, Beachview Motel owner Keith Rushholm is enjoying the lifestyle the 4-unit accommodation business provides.
Talking about a lot of tourists coming through. Whether that happens or not, we'll wait and see.
But he says the West Coast isn't immune from issues affecting the country.
Fuel price has gone up. It's over $3 a litre now if you're on a special. So that's a major issue that's looming for us here.
So quiet confidence from business owners after a slow winter.
Time now for some of your feedback. This is regarding the Milford Coastal Walkway, that's between Milford and Takapuna. Could council remove the cottage and put in a public gardens and set up a Give a Little page to improve it? The owners of the Firth property just seem very money hungry, says another texter. Why should the heritage building be demolished so somebody can privately own more money? $6 million they want, and another New Zealand heritage building goes. It's disgusting. Why does the Takapuna Firth cottage have a heritage listing? How old is it? What heritage features does it have? No media I have seen or heard has answered these questions. Very frustrating. That's from Penny Hanson. And ask the lawyer why the council doesn't build a new walkway around the property over the lava rocks. Isn't that the obvious solution? It really is not difficult. Regarding the political debate, come on people, says Maureen. How can you have a leaders' debate when one is ill? This time I agree with Luxon. Can the debate? No harm done. Just a stupid circus anyway. And another texter, we seem to be having an election by polls, journalists and dubious influences in which Luxon has been allowed to take over and longer than others. Now he is trying to bully Hipkins, sick with COVID, just more dirty politics from National. And another texter says, why all the fuss? We've already had 2 leaders' debates, both televised, so voters in the North and South Islands have had equal access. So what's the problem? OK, so Chris Hipkins has COVID and can't make the debate, but a party is more than its leader, so why not give the deputies a chance to speak? I think that would be really worthwhile. That's from Sarah. Thanks so much for your text, 2101, if you'd like more to add. Across the Tasman now, what do thunderstorms and helicopters have in common? Well, believe it or not, they are aphrodisiacs for crocodiles, and the mating season in central Queensland has got off with a bang. The mesmerising thunk-thunk of the low-flying Chinook, together with the thunder and warm rains, have triggered a passionate croc breeding season months early. For the details, here's the ABC's Chris Calcino.
John Lever knows a thing or two about crocodiles. He opened Queensland's first croc farm outside Rockhampton in 1981. Now there are more than 3,000 crocs in his watery stable, and he can sense when love is in the air.
Well, the crocodiles start vocalising to each other. I mean, they don't have a very sophisticated voice box, but they vibrate their windpipe to send messages out through the water. These are heavy vibrations. And quite often they spell air really loudly. So we hear this, going on in the middle of the night. If it's in the daytime, we look around and sure as eggs, you'll find crocodiles there going through the courtship process.
But this year is a little different. He says breeding season has started early, and he thinks the electricity in the water has something to do with the weather.
We've had a lovely warm winter. We've actually had a thunderstorm already, which is an aphrodisiac to a croc and really turns them on. And we've had some rain. So they're all the ingredients of an earlier mating season. So it's on.
But there's something else in the air too. Army choppers. Singapore's army regularly holds training exercises in Shoalwater Bay, about 100 kilometres north of Rockhampton. And the pilots used the Crocodile farm as a marker point to change course mid-flight.
And a few years ago, we had a big Chinook that came down low because the guys wanted to take some pictures of the crocodiles. And they were hanging out the door of the Chinook taking pictures. And, of course, Chinooks have got a big thump, 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 thump like that. All the crocodiles, all the big males got up and roared and bellowed up at the sky. And then after the helicopters left, they mated like mad. So there's something about the sonic waves that really gets them stirred up.
But why would the weather or the noise of military hardware have an impact? Dr. Cameron Baker is a researcher at Charles Darwin University who specialises in croc behaviour. He says the role of thunderstorms in crocodile mating behaviour is the subject of study.
It does seem to be that mating for the estuarine crocodiles is related to periods of storm activity and it'll be sort of in the lead up to the wet season approaching. So they're probably using it as a bit of a cue to say, hey, the wet's coming and it's a good time to start mating so the eggs are ready to be laid at just the right time.
But how does he explain the influence of the choppers?
So it might be producing a very low frequency sort of thump thump as it hits the water, and that may just coincidentally be similar to some of the sounds big mouth crocodiles produce to say, hey, this is my turf. So they may be calling back in response, sort of asserting that this is their spot.
For farmers like John Lever, it means bigger production numbers for crocodile meat and skins. And this year, he's expecting a bumper crop.
Yeah, we've got about 50 mature females here on the place. We get over 2,000 eggs every year just off the place here. Out of those 2,000 eggs, we get at least 1,200 babies hatch out.
And this year isn't a one-off. Australia signed a military training treaty with Singapore in 2020, resulting in up to 14,000 armed forces personnel conducting training in the region for up to 18 weeks a year. Over the coming decades, that could mean a lot more Chinooks to ignite the dormant libido of the cold-blooded suitors.
And to the texter who wants to hear the deputies, we will have Carmel Sepuloni and Nicola Willis on Checkpoint for a debate on Thursday night, so join us for that. Time now for some more of your feedback before we get to the news with Evie. Notwithstanding their success on the field, Hawke's Bay should forfeit the Shield for the outrageous disrespect they have shown to all the players who have contributed to a wonderful history of sportsmanship. Will New Zealand Rugby be conducting forensic chemical swab tests of the Ranfurly Shield? If not, why not? That's another texter. And another texter yet. The team has proved itself at best disrespectful and at worst unworthy of holding the Shield. Potential action would be to strip them of the Shield and declare it up for open competition next season. And listening to the conversation, says one texter regarding the Ranfurly Shield debacle, I'm more surprised than everyone, or that everyone, is surprised about it. And Hawke's Bay, respect the Shield, says another texter. Total nonsense, appalling behaviour with a national taonga. Thanks so much for your texts. Talk to you soon. Hear from you after the news.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Tēnā tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The Hawke's Bay rugby boss doesn't believe players were involved in snorting cocaine off a broken Ranfurly Shield. The Bay won the Shield off Wellington at the weekend, but during post-match celebrations, the newly refurbished loggerwood was dropped and it broke in half. Social media images have also shown the broken trophy with white powder and a rolled-up banknote on it, suggesting drug use. New Zealand Rugby has launched an investigation into the matter. Jay Campbell, the chief executive of Hawke's Bay Rugby, says the incident happened at a party at a player's flat where about a dozen players were present.
The indication so far from players is that they were unaware of what was going on. There are a number of other people that were at the party and the celebration. So I think we just need to wait and see what the findings of the investigation are before we take further action.
Jay Campbell says in a separate incident, a Hawke's Bay player has been charged with drink driving after the Shield victory. Police say they were told at 3:35 a.m. on Sunday that a car had hit a fence on Hunter Drive. They say a 24-year-old man has been summoned to appear in court and they're considering other driving charges. Severe gale force winds will continue to pummel a large part of the South Island and the lower North Island this evening. The wind storms have caused widespread disruption throughout today, including cancelled flights and ferry crossings, power outages and falling trees. Several orange-level wind warnings remain in place, with damaging gusts of up to 140 kilometres per hour in parts of Canterbury. Parts of the Waded Upper have also experienced gusts exceeding 170 kilometres per hour. Fire and Emergency has responded to nearly 90 call-outs throughout the South Island. The calls are due to vegetation fires caused by fallen power lines, roads blocked by power lines and trees, and securing trampolines and fences. Met Service says gusts of up to 120 kilometres an hour will continue to batter the capital into the evening. The agency is extending its strong wind warning for Wellington. Meteorologist John Law says the brisk winds will linger for at least the next few hours.
We should start to see these winds easing away as we head through towards the evening time, and more so as we head in towards the early hours of the morning tomorrow for Tuesday. But I think it will be a rather blustery night, especially around the south coast.
John Law says the northwesterlies are expected to be replaced by a southwesterly wind later this evening. Senior Labour MP Grant Robertson says the abuse candidates are experiencing this campaign is worse than previous elections. Multiple political parties have reported heightened levels of vitriol and violence, with some candidates saying they've been assaulted by the public. National says one of its candidates has been forced to move house after a gang threat. Another had their house broken into, a volunteer received death threats, and another was attacked by someone's dog. Mr Robertson says the abuse this campaign has been worse than previous elections. He says heightened levels of tension and abuse in this election campaign is not acceptable. Cabinet has signed off on an additional support package of more than $7 million for troubled Ruapehu alpine lifts. RAL went into voluntary administration last year, $45 million in debt due to a bad ski season and the COVID-19 lockdowns. Regional Development Minister Kieran McAnulty says Cabinet today decided that $7.35 million will be provided to RAL to allow the continued operation of its ski field operations until March 2024. A search and rescue operation is underway in northern Mexico after a church collapsed in Tamaulipas state, killing at least 7 people. The authorities say 10 injured people have been rescued from the rubble, but dozens more, including children, are believed to be trapped. The BBC's Julian Bedford reports.
Pictures aired on local television show people trying to hold up part of the collapsed building with poles, while others make their way through the debris in search of survivors. About 100 people are thought to have been inside the church when the roof caved in during a baptism. The cause of the accident remains unclear. CCTV images from Ciudad Madero posted on social media show the church roof seemingly imploding.
An Auckland councillor says commuters in a northern peninsula are disgusted with cuts to their ferry timetable. From today, a shortage of staff means the Gulf Harbour ferry will operate only at peak times, leaving replacement buses that take double the time to pick up the slack. The ferry will now only operate twice in the morning and twice in the evening. Auckland councillor John Watson says commuters aren't happy with the recent reductions.
They're really disgusted at the decimation of their service. So the service is being run down, and the people who have depended upon it, their lives have been thrown into a travel chaos.
John Watson says the timetable cut is an 83% reduction to regular sailings. And a Dunedin climate activist has been sentenced to 125 hours of community work after writing a fake postponement email for a petroleum industry conference. 64-year-old Rosemary Penwarden was found guilty of forgery and using a forged document in June. In 2019, she wrote a phony email telling delegates the conference had been postponed due to the climate crisis. Outside Dunedin District Court today, Rosemary Penwarden said she respected the judge's sentence.
I'm an ordinary grandmother, and I think anybody who really cares and who really listens to the climate science understands what is coming down the line, and it is bigger than one person writing a letter. It is bigger than one person doing community service.
Judge Michael Turner said Rosemary Penwarden didn't appear to regret her actions. That's the news.
Pacific Waves.
Bringing Kiribati back into the forum.
Diving into the big stories of the region.
They are an instrument of the Constitution of Fiji.
And shining a light on issues affecting Pacific peoples in Aotearoa and around the world.
Being able to go out into different places and areas that share social connections with our community was really special.
We tala noa to Pacific leaders, newsmakers, experts and commentators and bring you up-to-date coverage from our dedicated RNZ Pacific team and talented correspondents on the ground in the region. Pacific Waves at 8:15 weeknights on RNZ National.
You're back with Susana Leatawa next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. Fronts bring severe gales to parts of the country today. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Rain tonight, then becoming fine tomorrow morning. Waikato to Kapiti Coast, including Taumarunui, Taupo and Taihape. Rain this afternoon or evening, briefly heavy with possible thunderstorms in the west. Isolated showers tomorrow morning, otherwise fine. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Wellington. Rain spreading north today, then turning to a few showers tomorrow. Northwest gales from Hawke's Bay, southwards today, severe in exposed places. Nelson, Marlborough, Buller and Westland. Rain with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms in the north. Easing to showers everywhere this afternoon, then becoming fine tomorrow morning. Northwest gales in Marlborough today. Canterbury, Otago, Southland and Fiordland. Showers today, mainly fine tomorrow. Gale northwesterlies changing to southwest, severe in exposed places. Winds easing overnight. And Chatham Islands, partly cloudy. Occasional rain from tonight until tomorrow afternoon. Southwest gales tomorrow. It is 8 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora, Evie. No mai hoki mai. Returning to our earlier story about the coastal walkway on Auckland's North Shore that's been closed due to a stoush between a landowner and the council. For years, the owner of the Firth family property allowed members of the public to walk through their land, but now the inheritors have built a fence in the middle of the track, forcing walkers to clamber down onto the rocks and around if they wish to continue on the walk. The owners say they'll keep the fence up unless the council agrees to remove a heritage listing on a small cottage on the property, which greatly reduces its value because it can't be developed. Joining us now is Auckland Councillor Richard Hills. Kia ora, Richard.
Kia ora.
It's described to us as a dilapidated, asbestos-ridden building. Why can't council just remove the heritage listing so the track can reopen?
Yeah, so it's a complicated issue, something that's was listed before my time. It was proposed to be listed under North Shore City Council and then went through a plan change process, and there wasn't any opposition at the time. The issue for us now is that elected members cannot promise that it will be removed because it will have to go through a plan change process which independent commissioners need to look at the advice and the evidence, and then they decide if a heritage listing is removed. It's quite a specific legal process that has to be gone through, and there has to be a change of basically status of the building itself, which I guess in 10 years that may not be a huge change.
Why was it given heritage status?
So I don't know all the details. I'm not a heritage planner, but there is a number of issues that was sought at the time. It was one of the bungalows or cottages that the last standing on that section of Takapuna Milford area, and there was a lot of history behind Clifton Firth, and even Paul Firth, the resident who was living there until he passed away in 2021, talks about needing to protect this cottage and its history and what happened there. So I think that's what, I wasn't there for the plan change and the hearings and things like that, but those are the sorts of things that were put forward, and the independent commissioners at the time put the Category A listing on the house and the property, which is the strongest protection of a heritage place, I guess.
Would you support the heritage status being removed?
I mean, the issue is that it's, first of all, it may need to come to my committee, so I can't show predetermination, but I've asked council to look at every single legal avenue we can to keep the private access open. So this walkway covers 72 different private properties. The whole track goes through lots of different private properties, and the original walkway that was put there, maybe under North Shore City, I'm not sure when, was actually on the Firth property as well. So that was on private property as well. It wasn't on council land. So the issue is how we best negotiate to remove or keep that access open. The issue is that elected members cannot promise, especially through a land deal discussion, cannot promise to remove a heritage listing, because that is a regulatory function, and we legally, under the law, have to keep regulatory and non-regulatory decisions separate. So although it sounds really simple, it is obviously not as simple as people are making it out.
Is it fair, though, that every other landowner on that coastline has been able to develop mansions on their properties, but these landowners are stuck with a tiny decaying cottage they don't want?
Yeah, I guess that would have been discussed at the time that the heritage listing was put on, and that's with heritage places all over the city. So the issue would be if things like the Esplanade or the Vic Theatre or things that people cherish and love across the North Shore, but also the city, if we were able to just negotiate out heritage listing, that would be sort of against the law. So the issue is that the reasons it was put on, that would have to be discussed, and independent commissioners would, either agree to continue or remove it. It's not as simple as that. And as I said before, the last landowners supported protecting the heritage and protecting the historic nature of that place. But the issue is that it was only 10 years ago, I think, that it was put on. But it was North Shore City that really started that process underway. So although I understand, could change the property from 6 million to much higher, the issue is that under the law, the regulatory process of putting protections on, whether everyone agrees or not, there was actually no opposition at the time to that heritage listing. So it is a complicated issue. The owners could start their own private plan change process, which takes just the same amount of time as a council one. They could initiate that, but then it would still be decided by independent commissioners who get the heritage experts and everyone there. So it is a difficult discussion. When before this, the last negotiations a couple of years ago, before COVID, were around protecting the cottage and negotiations with the family and how you could turn it into, say, an artist in residence or a museum or something like that. So the discussions have changed quite a lot over the years of what conditions would be part of leaving that part of the track open.
Is the council considering building a path around the affected area of the walkway?
Yeah, so there has been considerations. I think the local board many years ago looked into that, and I've asked for that to be looked at again. The issue is that the private land actually goes quite far out over the rocks, and so people think the old walkway was on council land. It was on private land as well, and I know that negotiations fell down on what they would look like. It is quite a steep drop off the rocks, and because it was ruined last time, we could imagine we've had so many coastal assets ruined in the last year that it may be fairly difficult to get resource consent to put something out over the water, especially with climate change and these extreme weather events. So I've asked for that to be looked into. We're hoping for reports coming, which will come to the local board and to governing body at some point. But the issue will be, once again, regulatory versus non-regulatory. A resource consent is not in the control of elected members, much like heritage protection. That would have to go through a process, so we could, put all the engineering we want and put big poles into the rock there and push it out over the ocean. But whether that would get resource consent is once again not in our control. But I have asked for all the possible things, and so was the local board. But these discussions have been ongoing for some time.
Just to finish, Richard, there was a bridge there, a Walkway bridge 12 years ago. It got washed away and never replaced. Will that be replaced?
Yeah, so that's what I was talking about. That bridge or that structure, I'm not sure, I can't find when it was built, but it was not on public land. That was also on the Firth property. So it was closer to the water, I guess, or to the coast, but that was also, a lot of that was on private land. So that couldn't be replaced back on the private land when the local board looked into that 2013, I think. So there would have to be a new structure and a new resource consent going out over the water. There was investigations at the time, which, as far as I know, I wasn't on the council then, but the local board's negotiations and consenting negotiations failed with property owners because it would have been on private. So it would have to be out away and over into the tide, because a lot of people thought that old walkway that got washed away in the 2010 storms, I think a lot of people thought that was council, and it was on council land where it wasn't.
Thank you, Richard. That's Auckland Councillor Richard Hills. Hawke's Bay Magpies Ranfurly Shield win has been marred by after-game antics after a photo has emerged showing the shield broken in two with small piles of white powder on half of it. New Zealand Rugby Union has launched an investigation into reports of drug use and what occurred during the post-match celebration. It's also taken possession of the broken shield. New Zealand Rugby General Manager Community Rugby, Steve Lancaster, says he's deeply disappointed with what's happened.
We don't know exactly what's happened, but it appears that the shield has been dropped onto a hard surface, apparently a kitchen floor, and it appears that it's just split in two, which is really, really disappointing.
What's the Hawke's Bay Union told you about exactly what happened?
Yeah, well, that is pretty much what they've told us, is that it was, in their words, a genuine accident. A player picked it up and was moving across the room and dropped it, and it landed on a concrete floor and just unfortunately landed right on the point and has split. So that's what we've been told. We're getting possession of the shield today. It's making its way back from Hawke's Bay to us here at NZR. So we'll have a look at it and see what we can ascertain in terms of the extent of the damage and what it will take to repair it once we've got our hands on it.
Were the players snorting cocaine on the shield?
Oh, not that we're aware, right? So we're aware of images that are in circulation, but we don't have any information or clarification about what's taken place. And so we have launched an investigation to ascertain exactly what's gone on, but at this stage, we're at very early stages of that.
Have you asked the union that?
Yeah, their view is that they don't have any information either. It's been hard to, I guess, ascertain clear information, but certainly no awareness from on anyone's part of anything illicit taking place is what we've been told.
Any drug testing being done?
Look, drug testing is an employment matter, so whether or not there was is not something I could disclose to you as it being an employment matter. It's not something I can talk about.
And how about the surface of the shield being tested for any presence of drugs?
That's not something that we've contemplated at this stage. I don't know if that would be feasible or not, but as I said to you, it's making its way back to us at NZR now. We'll determine the next steps once we've got our hands on it.
So how does the shield, which we're told is a national taonga, end up in a kitchen, end up at a party?
Well, that's what we want to get to the bottom of, right? Like over the last 12 months, an incredible amount of work has gone into the restoration of that shield. And it's not just the restoration work itself, it's all of the consultation, the deliberation, the decision-making around what type of restoration to undertake. We were very deliberate in commissioning the restoration that the shield was put back into a condition where it was able to continue to circulate around our communities for another 100 years. And everybody that's had an association with the shield has a story about it, normally a personal story. I've had people sending me photos in the last 24 hours of their parents holding the shield, that sort of thing. So the fact that it's ended up in someone's kitchen isn't a problem. What's happened to it is certainly a problem, and that's what we want to get to the bottom of.
So are you going to keep possession of the shield now?
Well, again, once we've got receipt of it, we will ascertain the condition of it. We'll certainly have to reevaluate what the protocols are around the shield. But again, and as of our most recent deliberations, a little under a year ago, we were very deliberate in our view that it is a national treasure. It is something that people cherish, that communities cherish, and people should continue to have the opportunity to experience, touch and hold it. So that remains our position for now, but clearly we're going to have to reevaluate our protocols around exactly what that means.
Steve, how would you describe the team's actions? There was laughing in the videos online.
Look, I don't put a lot of stock in the sound on any of those things. I mean, you can only tell so much from the video, or certainly from the imagery that I've seen. You can see that it's broken. You can't see how it's happened. You can't determine what the timings are, in terms of when that's happened in relation to when the videos or images are captured. So we're not jumping to any conclusions until we've concluded our investigation and we can make some decisions and draw some conclusions based on factual accounts and information.
So just to clarify, why don't you put stock in those videos that are online?
We certainly put stock in what we see, but we're not drawing conclusions beyond what we can see.
So what are the consequences for this?
Well, again, to be determined. I hate to sound repetitive, right, but I mean, we're dealing with this in very short order. This only came to light for us yesterday evening. We've stood up an investigation today. We've reached out to the appropriate people to get that underway. There are consequences for a range of different scenarios. Some of those are set out in the Players' Collective Employment Agreement. We have relationship agreements with provincial unions, but look, we haven't even got that far down the track yet. At the moment, we're just trying to establish what's happened, what the damage is, and what we need to do to put the shield right.
So how are you doing the investigation? Who's involved?
Yeah, I can't comment on that level of detail. All I can really say is that we've stood this up at pretty short order today. We will be leading it as NZR. It is our investigation, but I can't really disclose any more detail than that while it's in play.
New Zealand Rugby's General Manager, Community Rugby, Steve Lancaster there. It's at 22 minutes past 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Spanish investigators are working to identify the victims of a deadly nightclub fire in the southeastern city of Murcia. The fire, which engulfed 3 nightclubs, killed at least 13 people. It's thought to be the country's worst such disaster in decades. Here's the BBC's Guy Hitchcoe.
The fire began at around 6 a.m. in the Fonda Milagros nightclub before spreading to 2 venues next to it. The cause of the blaze is unknown, but its effect was devastating.
We don't know anything. We are waiting for news to see whether some of our family members have come out alive.
I think we left 30 seconds or 1 minute before the alarms went off and all the lights went out and there was screams saying there was a fire. I was in a place where I could get out, but 5 family members and 2 friends are still missing.
Emergency services have been searching through the rubble, trying to find bodies. For friends and relatives of those who did not escape the blaze, it has been an agonising wait. They've been receiving support from counsellors in a nearby sports complex. The police are now carrying out DNA tests on the bodies of those killed in an attempt to identify them, but it could be a slow process. This is the worst nightclub fire in Spain in more than 30 years, and the local authorities have declared 3 days of mourning.
Italy's Prime Minister has warned Europe will be overwhelmed by migrants unless the EU finds solutions. Italy receives the largest number of smuggler boats carrying asylum seekers and other migrants in Europe, with many of them then aiming to travel north to countries like Germany, France or the UK. The BBC's Mark Lowen went to 2 different locations where migrants are attempting to cross.
Preparing, they hope, their footsteps to freedom. They trod the long path of desperation to Europe, but even now in Italy they want to go on to France and beyond. Numbers here have doubled since last year, armed with their dreams and kit from this charity to cross the tough Alpine border.
I come with myself.
Omar from Nigeria went via Libya, paying smugglers $800 to reach the southern Italian island of Lampedusa. His aim? To get to Britain.
I just want to have a good life, to study there.
But have you not seen all the pictures and have you not heard about people being sent back from Britain or sent back from France?
Yes, I am seeing, but I will just try my best to do. I will try again to go.
From Africa and the Middle East, they're on the same team, keeping spirits up before the hard journey ahead. Some fail early. An Egyptian is sent back, but the checks this side are rare. Volunteer Elena says the Italian police seem to turn a blind eye.
They know exactly what we do here. They know exactly what these people are here for. So it's like a game somehow. They know, but they pretend not to know.
There would be some people who would say you are encouraging illegal migration.
If you see somebody that needs something, or if you know which are the risks in the mountains, because you know the mountain and you live here, and can you allow people to walk in the mountain like this?
A short bus ride and they're at the border. But most avoid the official crossing, fearing police. Instead, they scatter into the forest, waiting to dash over the Alps. The pull of Europe leads through perilous paths that have already taken the lives of some seeking new ones. Others try a different route across, further south in Ventimiglia, close to Nice. But on the French side, controls are stringent. Each train is checked, leaving no door open. It is a constant to and fro. The Italian authorities happy enough to see the migrants cross here into France, no longer their responsibility, only for the French police to say we don't want them either and to send them back across the border. But caught in the middle of Europe's game of cat and mouse are the desperate. They may have failed today, but whatever the impediment, it is likely they will keep on trying.
In one of the biggest demonstrations Poland has seen in recent years, hundreds of thousands of people have taken to the streets of Warsaw in support of the political opposition. Their leader, Donald Tusk, says it marked the rebirth of the country and warned the democratic gains of the last 30 years were being endangered ahead of elections later this month. The BBC's Eastern Europe correspondent Sarah Rainsford filed this report.
For more than 3 hours, the crowd flowed through one of Warsaw's widest avenues. They called it the March of a Million Hearts, a giant show of support for the opposition, which is framing this month's election as the most important since the end of communism over 3 decades ago. It says the governing Law and Justice Party is a danger to democracy in Poland, undermining the rule of law and the free press, and ruining the country's relations with the EU. The leader of the opposition Civic Coalition, Donald Tusk, told the giant crowds that political change was inevitable. He spoke about mending ties with Europe and rebuilding a more open, tolerant Poland. State media were dismissive of the whole event. One pro-government politician called it a total flop. But many protesters we spoke to had travelled hundreds of miles to be here.
I'm a little bit older, so I know the time of communistic time, yes? So I know where it's going to, yes? And it's the last chance, because we are going towards Belarus. We are losing democracy.
This has been a tightly fought and often vicious campaign, with words like evil, enemy and foreign agent flung around with ease. But the stakes are high, and the election race is now entering its final straight.
Well, that's it from us. The Late News team will keep you updated throughout the night. And if you've missed anything at all from our Checkpoint program, you can find it at rnz.co.nz/checkpoint or on our Facebook page. And for all the latest news and information, feature stories from New Zealand and around the world, go to rnz.co.nz. First up tomorrow, Leonard Powell heads back to campus to hear what matters most to uni students ahead of the election.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Tēnā tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. New Zealand Rugby is investigating how the Ranfurly Shields came to be broken in two after Hawke's Bay's win over Wellington at the weekend and images of a white powder on the trophy. Hawke's Bay rugby boss, Jay Campbell, doesn't believe players were snorting cocaine. Gale force winds will continue to pummel parts of the South Island and the lower North Island this evening. Cabinet has approved more than $7 million for troubled Ruapehu alpine lifts. Last year, the company went into voluntary administration, owing $45 million. And Dunedin climate activist Rosemary Penwarden has been sentenced to